All right, we're back here with episode 42 of the GameFi Rundown. Again, we have a lot of topics here on Illuvium, but we have Jimbo as always. So, Jimbo, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be here for another Illuvium rundown video.
Illuvium Rundown. And then Viper coming back for the second time, I think. I think it's only been one time before this. But Viper, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Since you're like our arena expert here, we're going to talk about that first. So we just got the new patch 0.3.5, is that what it is? The new arena mode. So I guess first thoughts from both of you, but Viper, what do you got? First thoughts on everything new that came out with it? Like how you compose the teams, how it's working in PvP, are you having fun with it?
Basically, let's start with this, right? It's an update of a lot of fundamental systems in the game, more than it is a, let's say, balance patch, right? This is probably the biggest beta feeling we have in the game, because I don't think a whole lot was like tested or whatever, right? It's mainly the feedback that was given in terms of like, okay, we want these are the feelings that people have playing the game, right? And then what do you do? Like, how do you change the, I don't know, like make the feedback work, right? So the things that came up were, well, you don't want to play all those like big Illuvians at the beginning and so on. So this Ascension coin system came in. I think that system is really good, because the thing that I feel like was lacking a lot, so after playing the game a lot, I think my fundamental criticism was that the game's skill ceiling felt very, very low. It was like, well, I can easily explain the game to somebody and what to do, and very quickly they're gonna play close to perfect in terms of all the decisions that actually matter in terms of winning and losing. And maybe there's some small niche min-max optimization that barely ever matters, and sure, they don't make that correct, but again, it just it doesn't really matter. So skill ceiling seemed very, very low. I think part of that was that there's a lot of super polarizing decisions, and it didn't feel really turn-based, in the sense that usually in a game, there's like something that restricts what you can do, right? In most games, there's like a mana system, which means, okay, you can only do this much in this turn, and the opponent knows, okay, they can only do this much in the next turn. They have committed whatever resources at the moment, and therefore they have this and that option and so on. That was kind of missing, especially in like later patches that we had of the beta, where there's like full team swap thing. And I mean, I kept taking this as a joke, but it kind of what it was with the full team swap thing. I take a coin, and the decision that I make in a turn is like, well, do I option A or B? And I lost the coin. And there was the issue, and I think that Ascension coin system certainly helps a lot with that, because it means, first of all, you can either make, I don't know, you can spend all the coins in this turn, you can maybe prepare some swaps by, for example, I don't know, you can upgrade the stage 2 Illuvio to stage 3, and then the next turn, and then one coin carries over, so you have 3, and then you can sell it, and you have 4 the next turn. You can maybe make some bigger moves, but you had a weaker turn before that. And just like setups like that, I think those are really, really good, because those also give you more skill expression. So I think that was like a really, really long talk on that point, but I think that's the major part of that update. And is it balanced? Are the numbers perfect? I mean, who knows, right? I fundamentally think that we're gonna see a bunch more changes and a bunch of other things, because like the main questions that were asked from like lab side, right, from Ben in Arena chat, was like, give us feedback to, I think it was Ascension, the hyper system, UI and UX, and there was one other one. And I think the feedback on all of those things is like a very positive direction in my opinion, but I also think there's probably like a bunch of other things that they have planned and that we don't see it, right? For example, I think last month's leak videos, there were a bunch of these big board-wide effects happening that we just saw the animations, that those are not in the game yet, right? I think that that's probably something big that's going to happen. So that's like all optimistic, right? I think all the changes that actually happen and come through, they've always been, these fundamental system changes have been positive. And I don't know, where do I see the issues at the moment still? It's basically what the first point that I mentioned, where restricting what somebody can do in a turn to some extent. I think that's a positive in a strategy, and especially in a card game, to now I have to pick up the coin again. I have a dice here, right? So I cannot roll the dice of odd or even or something like that. And that major fundamental coin toss is just outperforming all these small decisions. So the full blind positioning thing, I still have issues with that. I'm like, I don't know, can we like do something there? Maybe a lot of things in the future, or maybe some like all the Illuviums being released, maybe whatever other changes, they will indirectly fix that. I don't know, but currently it's okay, this blind thing. A lot of games I take the dice and I'm like auto even, left or right side. Something like that. I'm not happy with that. And legendary augment betting, I don't know, it feels the same because there's something that's really, really good for your opponent and it does entirely nothing for you. The only okay outcome for you is if you bet the exact same amount of coins, which is 0 to 3. So it's like 25%, it's an even outcome, 75% losing, just straight up. I don't think there's real player input. I think those are like fake things that people tell themselves when they win the dice roll or the coin toss. It's like, yes, I made the right play in hindsight. Or when they lose it, it's like, oh, then it was luck and so on. So I think that's like a very fundamental thing in the community.
I was going to say, one of the other big things that I've noticed in this is the way that the augments work in general. So not just the legendary augments, but how you're not building the augments into your deck. You're basically selecting them in certain turns, which also increases the RNG really, because then you don't know what you're gonna get. Just like with the legendary augments, you could get things that work good for your team, or you might get something that doesn't work very good for your team. Know more about that, and probably Jimbo as well. So Jimbo, why don't you jump in here? What do you think about the way that the augments are set up in this new update?
I think it's better than what we had before personally, because before you could just set up all of your augments. You had everything perfect right before the game and you could use them as soon as you wanted to. Now you kind of, there's a little bit more decision making depending on the RNG of what you get and which augment, but it really, really, really sucks when you get like 2 or 3 rounds in a row where you get no augments that you actually need, and then you go on like a 14 game losing streak. That really sucks. But overall, the game's actually really fun, so I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Like Viper said, the legendary augment stage, I think that'll probably be fixed in the future because they still don't have the update in where the augments are affected by what team you have, right?
No, that's it.
Oh, it's in now? Oh, well,
Yeah,
I don't know.
Since January.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Wow, I didn't know that.
You haven't noticed when you have a certain alluvials in your team, then you're getting those like synergy augments that pop up.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a good point. I thought I was just getting lucky, but anyways, even still, sometimes it's just like the augments that go with your team, they're just not nowhere near as beneficial as some of the augments that the other player could get regardless. So I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. I think it's fine for now. But I'm excited to see the board-wide effects that they're going to bring into the game.
I mean, do you think the RNG effects like improve the game? That there's a little more RNG involved?
Yes. The little bit of RNG should improve the amount of agency that players have because the other player is getting that same RNG, so they're not always going to get the perfect augments or that they need. So being able to navigate between these 3 augments that aren't completely optimal, but I could use it in this or that situation, I feel like increases the amount of skill it takes to play the game.
And Viper, from a competitive standpoint, like how do you feel about that? Does more RNG kind of screw you up, or what do you think?
I mean, it depends, right? Like, for example, we can objectively say Teamfight Tactics has a tremendous amount of random events and variants happening in the game, yet the player agency is crazy high. Sure, there's like an insane amount of, I don't know, dice rolls or whatever, like random events that have input, but you as a player have enough input on those events and dealing with them and the decisions that you actually make. They matter enough, and that's always the relevant part. The relevant part is not is RNG good, is RNG bad, and whatever. I mean, the Illuvium game right now has an insane amount of RNG. You have blind positioning, you have what teams you queue into each other, you have crit, you have dodge, you have the augments that you get. There's so much RNG. There has always been a crazy amount of RNG in Illuvium so far. I would argue it has always had more in the current beta testing versions. I would say they always had more RNG than TFT, and there was the highest player agency was probably in the first month when we had augments that were really powerful and we could put them in our teams and so on. And maybe so there was player agency was the highest. Ever since then, it's been lower because I guess I'm not gonna have like a 10-minute rant on that. I guess rant is not the right word. It's not. I don't mean this like super negative, but TLDR, Illuvium has a lot of RNG. It always had a lot of RNG in every patch. So does a lot of other games have that. That's normal. The question is how much input do your decisions have in terms of the outcome of the game. Like you could do something very, very minor that in theory, objectively, is the correct thing to do, but 1 out of 20 games, it only changes the outcome. You can do it right, you can min-max in 20 out of 20 games, but only one time it actually matters. That is not what you want. You want that to matter in, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 or 15 out of the 20 games. And I would say that is the issue with the recent patches that we had on the balance side, where we had this meta with you flip the coin on the team swap. You flip the coin on which side to choose. You have legendary augment betting that oftentimes comes down to this as well. Or yeah, just like these overreaching decisions that every silver player realistically can see, and the min-maxing decisions that barely anyone in the game is seeing, that barely anyone in the game is actually doing correct, they didn't matter a whole lot. And I think we've seen that on like a lot of leaderboard months as well, when just the MMR of the top accounts just was lower than the week before, when most people were losing points because they just couldn't maintain the high win rate that they had in previous weeks, because the game just didn't allow it anymore due to, like, for once, just players get better, right? Everybody just got better at the game. And on the other side, it's again like these like super overreaching things that every silver player could see. That's like the thing when I went to get earlier. I was like, I don't know, people in the community sometimes go very, very hindsight oriented. You won, therefore it was correct. You lost, therefore it was wrong. That's totally bullshit. If you're winning and losing, doesn't impact that. And yeah, just don't be results oriented. I think that's overall good message.
So you touched on balancing a little bit. So getting back to that, it seems to me like every time there's a patch, there ends up being like, you know, a new meta that builds up and a new best team or a new couple of best teams. Is it possible to get to a point where like anyone can just put together a team with any set of alluvials and be competitive? Or is it always going to be out of balance and always going to need tweaking?
I mean, none of the patches really had like a super balance oriented thing, right? Every patch was changing some fundamental thing in the game, right? We changed, you can play as many augments. You don't have to go through the patches, but every patch like changed a lot about fundamental things in the game and bug fixes, right? So I don't think there was ever really the goal of, okay, let's balance this, because there's also Illuvials missing and probably some future mechanics and so on. So that's always a bit, I don't know, a heated topic, because everybody's like crying for let's balance and do this update, and it's only a line of code. Like all of that would just delay the finished product, right? Then on the fundamental thing, any video game always is going to have something that's objectively better than the other thing. Any game ever is always going to have something that's objectively better, right? I think on that topic, there's two options, right? There's either you play rock, paper, scissors. You have something that is not necessarily the best, but I think saying the best is always, I don't know, oftentimes wrong, especially if in hindsight you play an old patch in a game, on a card game, an old format, and then people figure out new stuff 2 years later. But there's always something that's the most played thing. And then is there something that can beat the most played thing? Yes or no? If there's yes, okay, either that chain keeps going and there's something that can beat the new most played thing, or it stops, right? If it stops, then you have one thing that everybody is playing. And I guess then if the mirror match is fun and good, great. Especially competitively balanced speaking, great. If the mirror match is just a coin toss and there's no player agency, the decisions don't matter or whatever, then it's bad. And yeah, it's like either you have rock, paper, scissors, which I think Illuvium is just going to end on having, because the game is fundamentally set up very, very well for that. Any kind of thing where you have a deck building, team building thing is usually set up very well for rock, paper, scissors, because if everybody's playing the same thing, you can usually count it. Everybody's playing like a fire team, you can play an earth team, you're gonna win. Everybody's playing a rogue team, you play like a rogue counter, you're gonna win. That's super, super good setup in Illuvium. And yeah, I think we're just gonna have this rock, paper, scissors thing. And I keep seeing people in Discord and social media be like, that's horrible and you don't wanna this and that. But it's like the other option, you only play mirror matches. And those are the two balanced options for games. There is nothing else. This thing, I'm just gonna play better than the other person. Okay, you play an FPS game, the other person's gun kills him 1 bullet less. Well, if they don't miss a shot, you lose. So like, what is there to like play? If the enemy makes a lot of mistakes, yes, if they miss shots, you can beat them. But what if they don't? So at the top end of the game, it's always gonna be, you just play whatever's the best. Maybe you're a step ahead of other people and you find the thing that beats what most play earlier. or you find something that like entirely new and so on, sure. But then you're strategically ahead, basically, and that's always going to be the case, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I always think about like Malura has been one of my favorite alluvials. So it's just like, oh, if I wanted to pick like Malura and say in Umbre because I like those two, can I build a viable team around those two? And it doesn't seem like I've been able to do that right now. Jimbo, what do you think about on the balancing? Do you think the balancing will get better once we have all the alluvials out and we're in open beta?
I think, as Viper kind of touched on, the goal has not really been to balance the game. People have been complaining about it a lot, but understand, like, we have to get the game out on time. It's already been delayed, so balancing is a non-issue right now. Honestly, we should just be happy that Illuvium is working towards the final product. I think, remember, it's a beta, and once we get into open beta and there's nothing left to add, and all of the foundational like mechanics inside of the game are placed down, I think it'll be so much easier to balance. And as Viper said, I think it's always going to be that thing where there's like always one deck that's the best, but there will always be like slight variations to that deck or another deck that doesn't have as good of a win rate, but you can still play it into certain situations and win. So I think I'm not super worried about balancing, and I think even like beyond that, I think once the 8-player mode comes out, where you have like 1v1 v1v1 like in TFT, I think there's going to be so much variance, no one's going to complain about anything.
I was about to say on the, like, there's always going to be like one best thing and so on, and you wanting to play like, I don't know, off-meta team essentially. It's usually easier to play anything that's, so to say, off-meta or rogue deck or whatever you would say in TCG games, if there is like a tier 0 meta, which means there's one thing that everybody plays. Then you can be like, okay, I want to play Malura and Umbra. What can I put in there that is good versus what everybody else is playing? And then it's probably going to be okay. That is easier to do if there's like one thing that everybody plays. But if there's like many things people are playing, then it's a lot harder because you can't just be like, okay, I'm just going to counter this and I'm going to be very all in on my counter. And if I play versus the thing I want to counter, which most people play, nice, right? It's perfect and it's going to work. So yeah, I mean, it always depends on, when you ask me competitively, I guess I always have this like very elitist take where if I speak something is good or competitive, it's like top 0.01% or something, like 100 or less best players and ranks and things in the game. Playing something like, I don't know, if you talk about League of Legends, where you can play whatever character you want in like Plat or Diamond. It doesn't matter, right? But you reach, I don't know, Challenger, maybe you can't play every character anymore. Maybe some characters are just not good enough. And that's just going to be the case, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's like the difference between me and you. Like, you're going to be playing at the top of the leaderboards, and I'm going to be playing somewhere in the bottom half. But I want to move on to this next topic here. So getting away a little bit from just the arena side of things, just Illuvium overall. So whether we're looking at Overworld or Illuvium Zero or even Arena. Well, I guess the backstory of this is a game like Mavia had just came out. It was something that I was playing. And then we've gone like a couple weeks where we haven't got any like major updates. So it seems to get stale really quick. You can just tell in that community, everyone's just like waiting for the next update. People are playing less. So when it comes to Illuvium, how often do we need to see like real updates like this for it to like remain sticky, for people to be coming back every day? Like if we get into open beta and people are going on these overworld runs, how long before they just get bored with what they're seeing before we need to have some kind of update involved in that? Jimbo, why don't we start with you on that one?
I mean, yeah. So this is actually a really interesting question for me because I've always heard Kieran and them say, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I've heard them say that they want to do a new set every year. Is that correct?
I think he's a little over a year. I think I might have heard like a year and a half.
Yeah,
But yeah.
to me, that's an interesting. I personally, because Pokemon comes out every 3 years, and I think like 2 to 3 years would be better for Illuvium because then you can let the meta stabilize and people. My problem with TFT is it feels like the game changes every 3 months and you have to completely relearn the game. I don't want that for Illuvium, and I think if we kept a little bit of space for there to be a breather, like Arena wouldn't, you wouldn't have to completely relearn Arena, and I'm sure there's gonna be things in Overworld that you would have to relearn when we find out more about Overworld.
But doesn't that bring the excitement back into it though? Like, oh, something's new. I gotta figure this out. I can figure it out before everyone else figures it out.
No, I agree, but I think doing it too soon and too quickly is actually could be bad for like return players. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a very personalized take for me, but I don't like super consistent updates like that personally. But
Well, you're also kind of thinking of this from like the arena standpoint, right? Because think about it from an overworld standpoint. If you were just going to be an overworld player, they introduce, I don't know, let's just say 2 new alluvial lines. Maybe they go about doing it that way. Like, I can't see much of a negative side to that. Like, an overworld player would be excited. Oh, now I have these new alluvials I can go and capture.
So if they were going, so in my head I was thinking more like Pokemon. They release like 100 in a batch. If they were going to release like one or two, let's say like League of Legends does with Champions, they'll release one every like 3 to 4 months. I think that would be fine, but I'm not sure that's how they wanted it to happen. So if that was the case, I would be cool with it, but I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think about that, Viper?
Yeah, I guess I also have like mixed ideas on that because it kind of depends on the game and the player base that you just end up having. Right, there's people playing chess and Go, and those games don't have updates. There are people playing, I don't know, Counter-Strike and things like that. We don't really have fundamental updates, right? Or we want to look at like most battle royale games and so on. Like, what are the updates? Like, okay, this weapon is a bit better, this weapon is a bit worse. Okay, that's not like a major gameplay change or something like that. Like in TFT, TFT is pretty much Jimbo says. You kind of have to relearn the game every few months because you don't know any of the characters, you don't know any of the new mechanic and so on. So sometimes, like recently, like some economy breakpoints and so on change as well. So there's a lot information you have to input again to just be good and understand what's going on. Yeah, I think there's upsides and downsides of that. It depends on the player base that you end up having and attracting. I think on the overall, the Illuvia sets, by the way, I don't think it's going to be like 150 every time. I think it's been set like 50-ish or like smaller sets. So yeah, I think like having those smaller sets, that probably is a good thing. And overall, we don't launch with all the regions available anyways, right? So there's going to be the next region and the next region and so on. So I guess that's a really good update for overworld players, where they just have, I don't know, this whole new thing to explore and like different drop chances and so on and so on. So there's probably a lot updates coming out that are like relevant and major-ish, right? Because I think every region is going to have some new lore thing probably as well and whatnot. And then fundamentally, Illuvium also has more games, right? It's going to be more games added to the, or what is it, like IBG, interconnected blockchain game, and it's the term. Yep. So yeah, it's just like you have the updates direct. It's like all the overworld regions, then the different Illuvia sets, probably some like different game modes for arena, maybe some overworld things, right? People have talked about do some like speedrun parkour thing for overworld and so on. So I think you'd certainly have enough room for a bunch of things that are not this super crazy, you have to relearn the entire game thing like Jimbo mentioned.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Before we move on to the next topic, something that I know I've heard Kieran say before, I think he actually said it in the AMA with me, is what they were planning to do for new sets is, say, maybe have like 15 new lines, which would be basically like 45 new alluvials, but then they'll fill in the rest of the alluvials with like the same alluvials but different synergies and classes. So you might get in set 2, it might be like a ram fire, like a frost ram fire that's a fighter or something like that. So just changing up the affinities in synergies, but still getting essentially a full set of new alluvials. They just won't all be completely new. So let's get to this next topic. Web3 eSports. Is it going to be better than Web2 esports? And if so, like, what's the difference and how can Web3 do it better? Are we going to have more money because we got the token involved? Yeah, Viper, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Web3 just has fundamentally far more money in it, right? Because I think currently Web3 customer just spends more money than a Web2 customer, and esports just is a marketing tool for whatever game you have. And yeah, I guess the big difference is on the Web3 scale, you also have people investing, right? Because you have very economy-driven games, and it's not just the studios lending you digital things where you can just play the game with, and eventually you don't play the game anymore and they're useless and you can't do anything or whatnot. So yeah, I think it attracts higher paying customers and it attracts investors as well. So it's just more money involvement. Therefore, the marketing, aka esports, is probably just going to pay better as well. And then it's also just more funding, right? I think in general, a lot of companies have cut back on their esport just spendings in general and the events that they do. Maybe they learned that they can do a bunch of stuff online and it's not that much worse. And then the higher ups at the company are like, yeah, you're just going to keep doing it online. We're not going to give you a couple million to rent out a big stadium anymore if we don't have to do that. So maybe Web2 just has that funding issue, while on the other side, Web3 just going to throw money at it. I think that's what a lot of things in Web3 are really, really good at doing.
Yeah, and what I like about like something like Illuvium, for example, is that they could put up, however much amount of ILV that they want. I mean, obviously in Illuvium with the tokenomics, we have like a window of that like 1 million ILV. But essentially that's kind of like they don't need that revenue to back it up. They don't need to take $100,000 of the revenue that comes in to put it towards a tournament. They can take $100,000 of unminted ILV, and technically it'll inflate the market a little bit temporarily, but that's kind of like free, almost like free money that gets put out there for tournaments that Web 2 doesn't have the ability to do. Jimbo, what are you laughing for? Am I saying that wrong? Am I making it sound bad?
You made it sound bad, but you're right. Like saying free money is like just crazy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You're right though. I mean, you're right. I think like there, and something like Viper said, like there's just so much more money in Web3. And spoiler alert, Web3 is already in esports. Team Liquid, Coinbase, and obviously they did the partnership with Illuvium. TSM was sponsored by FTX, but we're not going to really talk about that one because Gary Gensler didn't do his job, so we can blame the government for that. You guys can blame the government for TSM's implosion, but yeah, there's just so much more money in Web3, and the demographics, like the age of the demographics who watch esports and cryptocurrency line up. The morally, those two don't line up very much, but I think that'll merge over time as Web3 becomes more normalized in gaming. So that's pretty much my take on that. Web3 and esports, it's just money. There's so much more money, and esports is already having such a terrible time with, getting any kind of revenue back. A lot of these orgs are feeling the heat of feeling the heat. When we were feeling the heat in the bear market, so were the esports orgs. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, so now are we going to see like top esports players from other games look at like Web3 games like Illuvium? Oh, they're having this esports tournament for $250,000 or whatever. I'm going to start learning these new games because they pay out way more than the Web 2 games that they're playing. Like I used to be involved in like Super Smash Bros. And one of the things that they always talked about, like being from Nintendo, they'd have these big tournaments that like top players in the world were just getting shit winnings, and it's just like they kept playing because they loved the game. But in the Web 3 version, they could be making a lot more money. So are people going to be just flocking over to Web3 when they see the money coming in?
I think Web3 has to prove itself first. But yes, obviously, once Web3 proves itself and these shitty Web3 dev... So once these shitty Web3 game devs stop being lunatics and stealing everybody's money and we see quality projects come out and their esports are flourishing and they're actually good games, and the stigma behind NFTs goes away from people who don't know how to think for themselves, of course, like everybody's going to flock to Web3 esports. Again, it's just money. There's so much money here. And once people realize that they've been being stupid and that NFTs are a good thing, just when used in the right hands by the right companies that aren't going to screw you over, then we're going to see millions of people flow into esports. And there's going to be a ton of more players looking to try and be esports players because there's so much more money now.
In Viper, I know you've been in competitive gaming for a while, even before Illuvium. So do you know any people that were maybe still stuck in the Web 2 esports realm that might be making the switch over soon?
I mean, there's more and more people that essentially go from, how do I put that, like dying Web 2 games, dying Web 2 esports things and so on, especially over the recent years, because it's been harder to get sponsorship contracts because viewership and so on, it's going down. You don't have the live events anymore. Funding of companies is kind of screwed. Then I guess markets have not been great. You look at some like Face, for example, right? I think that like their stock was down 99% at some point. So things like that, it's not great for this Web 2 just esport and getting even good sponsorship contracts and so on. Then companies like Blizzard had tremendous issues when the whole world was like not allowed to go outside anymore, and they had these insane esport leagues and stadiums built and partnerships, and it was like, oh, you can't do it anymore because ping exists, so you kind of have to be at the same spot. and cheating exists and so on. So yeah, there's like a lot of really negative things happening in Web 2 that just screwed a lot of people's livelihoods over to some extent. And especially, I mean, I kind of used to, I was like doing Web 2 esports for a living, right? And I was doing streaming. Streaming was like making far less money, but I also did streaming. And I was seeing Illuvium or a lot of crypto and Web3 things. I was like, yeah, you can actually make far more money playing these games than if I go any Web2 thing, right? Like I was even 2 years ago thinking, okay, I could play TFT. What is like the TFT World Championship at that point? I win, it's like some low 5-figure sum. I think nowadays it's a bit more, but it's still like $250,000 or whatever for World Championship.
It's
Maybe
not a
it's
lot.
$500,000. It's going up, like TFT is doing well, but that's like the best Web2 strategy game I can play. That is the highest monetizable win, and you cannot live off esports in that, for example. The only thing you can do is content and streaming. And that is true for most of those games. And there's dozens of Web3 games where, especially because the competition is a complete joke at the moment, there's barely anybody that like I would consider any competition at all. Like in, I don't know, maybe this sounds like mean or weird or arrogant or whatever, but to put that in perspective, right? I made $250,000 prize money in Hearthstone, which was the AAA top strategy game at the time. And I'm consistently, if I play TFT for fun, I'm like a top 100 player on my server, just playing like casually for fun and so on. There's barely anybody in any Web3 game that I would consider a competition if I would put my mind actually to it. And the same goes for a lot of other people with similar backgrounds. And I see a lot of them, for example, play Parallel recently. And they just farm leaderboard rewards. I think one of them recently said, I spent like 7K on some NFT deck and now they make 3 to 4K a month pretty securely because being top 10 on the leaderboard is, they just are top 10, right? And you could probably do that in a lot of games. And again, because the competition, usually it would be like people go from the like AAA top tier game to like the lower ones until the competition is like not that difficult anymore, that they are the one that's making a net profit, which for example in Hearthstone, you would see people play, okay, Runeterra comes out, let me play Runeterra. There's barely any money involved, but the competition is weak. Or Gwent or like whatever new card game would come up, people would be like, oh, let me play this if they just were like B, C tier level players in Hearthstone. And the same thing is now. It's like all people just go like, okay, which game can I play? Where's the competition relatively easy? And then they just go for that. So yeah, I think people just follow the money. Like it's if you want to do this as a job, then you do it as a job. Then you like you look at what is the lucrative thing to do.
I think you're gonna do pretty well.
I mean, I'm doing way more content nowadays. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I see your content coming out. That's great too, and I know you're streaming a lot too. But
yeah, I did really well with your deck yesterday on stream. By the way, it was fun.
Yeah,
sometimes I look at some of your stuff and I'm just like,
that might help.
Dude, I went on a 14-game losing streak. What the fuck, man? How's that even possible? I said I'm not ending the stream. Yeah, I said I'm not ending stream until I win. I ended the stream. There's no chance. 14 in a row. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the podcast, but I wanted to complain real quick.
I saw that screenshot. No, I was just about to say, like, just knowing how well Viper's playing in Illuvium, like, I see him putting out YouTube videos, and I'm just like, just doing that for fun. He doesn't need to build up his YouTube. He's going to be making these top leaderboard rewards every week.
True.
That's going to be nice. I wish I was a better player. I'm going to keep working at it. I don't think I'm going to be a top player. Let's move on to the last topic here. So this is kind of like a two-part question here. Illuvium, the private beta testnet, going to be coming out soon. I would think about within the next month as the timeline shows. And then we got open beta coming soon. Are either of you going to have time to play any other games, or are you going to be focusing like fully on Illuvium? And if you're focusing fully on Illuvium, like, where are you going to put your time? You're going to put it into like overworld until you build up a deck? Viper, maybe for you, are you just going to be buying some Illuvials off of the market and then just playing Arena? You know, what's your plan here? Jimbo, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I'll be playing probably like 95% Illuvium, and then if a really good Web3 game comes out that I don't have to think about, like a shooter, I'll play it. Or if a very good MOBA comes out and it's like a Web3 game, I'll probably play that a little bit. But no, it's going to be mostly Illuvium for sure. Yeah, what was the other part of the question?
Oh, I was going to say, like, if it's going to be mostly Illuvium, like, what are you going to be doing in Illuvium? Because obviously there's a bunch of different routes you could take.
Yeah, I'll just be playing Overworld, like tier 3 runs for content, and then like Arena.
Cool. What about you, Viper?
I'm just going to play Illuvium, I think, for now. That's what I have been interested in and invested in, just like by investing my time, I mean. I guess I also have money invested in Illuvium, but no, Illuvium looks really, really promising to me. That's what brought me to the space mainly as well, because I thought this actually is a game and a company that is doing the things, that is building the things that I feel like I'm missing, just from the games that I enjoyed playing. I think most of the other Web3 games, I think even some games that I'm told are really, really good, I just look at them and I'm super, super picky when it comes to just how the games actually look. I'm very, very picky for graphics, and I'm like, there's just nothing that looks great. Like even on the like card games and simple things, I'm like this. It just doesn't look good, right? Like some of the that's just what I don't like. I don't know. I would like to play polished games with good graphics, with like clean animations and so on. I don't really like beta testing or alpha testing games, which most of these games are, and they sometimes look really meh and so on. So now I'm looking forward to Illuvium, and like if somebody else makes like games that look really, really cool, like a shooter that looks like Warzone, like I'm gonna play that shooter. That's a fun game to play. Why wouldn't I just play a fun game where I just played similar versions as well? But I'm not gonna just play them because it's like a Web3 or crypto game and it looks bad. I don't know. I'm super picky on that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I'm super picky as well. Like most of these new games that come out, I'm just not interested. I mean, for me personally, I've been playing a little bit of Mavia. I like that because I can just play on my phone when I'm away from my computer. If I'm sitting at my computer, it's going to be Illuvium. That's where I'm going to be putting in my time. And then aside from that, sometimes I play Mario Kart with my daughter. But most of the time, it's going to be Illuvium. And I'm probably going to focus mostly on the overworld. But definitely Illuvium 0 as well, because I have 5 plots of land. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm excited for this to come out soon. I really haven't been playing a whole lot of video games past, I don't know, 5+ years of my life. So it'll be nice to kind of get, sunk into one again. Yeah, but that pretty much concludes this episode of the GameFi Rundown. So, sorry if I didn't bring any energy today. I've just been exhausted. Jimbo, thanks for bringing a little bit of your energy.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. And Viper, definitely thanks for coming on. You've always got some good insight from being a top player in this game.
Yeah, happy to be here as always.
All right, well, we'll have you on again, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of the GameFi Rundown. So, thanks everyone for watching, and catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.